In today's video, I want to share something with you which will really change how you hear and use compression. This is quite an extensive topic. So you must know there are various ways of compression. So you have upwards, downwards compression, you have the opposite expansion, upwards, downwards expansion, and I will dive today more into downwards compression and especially not only what a compressor does and how it functions, we will go about that, but mostly how it colors the sound and how does it feel. Because even if you only intend to control the dynamics with your compressor, then this goes hand in hand with coloring. So you cannot do one without the other. You cannot color the sound with a compressor without changing the dynamics, and you cannot control the dynamics without changing the sound. And that's a really important thing to consider, because when I started, I wasn't seeing that. And actually there was a really good video from Krish Audio which opened my eyes, and that's also the reason why I want to share this with you. Let's talk maybe first about the wave here, this waveform. What a compressor does to the dynamics, and a little bit about how this compressor works. So a big thanks to Psytrance. They sponsored me the NFR version of this glue compressor so that I can show it here in this tutorial. That also said, because a glue compressor, most of you know the glue compressor probably from putting it on a drum bus. And there are also different applications where you can use a compressor. You can use it here in the trucks, you can use it in the bus, you can use it in the master. And today I will use this glue compressor here in the truck. As you can see, the waveform has kind of like this filled black space, and it has that small peaks here. And also in the filled black space, you have kind of like valleys and hills. And those peaks here are the peaks you're seeing in the mixer. And in the mixer, if you see, it has also two types of green. So the one is the peaks and the other one is the RMS, the root means squared. So basically you could say like, you could describe maybe the dynamics of the sound by how much pressure does it have all the time and how much pressure has it as its highest points. So that's basically the range, dynamic range. So how much it moves from that level where it's kind of like all the time present to this highest peaks here. And with a compressor here, also you can see, for example, like here in the Ableton compressor, you can also attack different things. But now we're talking here about the peaks. And a peak would be like this. So the first thing we see in a compressor is how much does it compress. So we have a meter here. In the Ableton compressor, you have the gain reduction here. So you can see how much gain it is reducing. So that's the same. And then you have the threshold. You can imagine the threshold basically as a line. So let's move this. And once those peaks here past this line, the compression starts. So the compressor gets triggered, and once those peaks pass the line, the compressor gets triggered, and then all the other knobs come into place. So the first knob we will talk about is the attack. So if the attack is lower, then the compression will start earlier. So the peak is coming in, and then this is the time how long the compressor reacts until it compresses the signal. And the ratio is how much does it compress the signal. And I think that's something you can see really cool on the Ableton compressors. The ratio is 1, we don't have any compression at all. And it would be infinity, then it's more like a limiter. So the signal comes in and gets like completely flattened. And then we have the release here, and the release is then how long it takes then the signal to go back to its original volume. And here we have a button where you can bypass the compressor and kind of like hear the effects of the compressor without the makeup gain and the gain reduction here. So, but you can also switch it off here. And then we have this dry wet here. With the dry wet, you can decide how much of the dry signal, so the uncompressed signal, and with the wet, how much of the compressed signal you let through. And this is something special on this compressor here. It's like a wave shaper. I would ignore it for this tutorial for now. And what I think which is really interesting is here the side chaining. So in the Ableton compressor, for example, you have the side chaining here. You can then duck this signal, but trigger it with another signal. But what's even more interesting in the glue compressor here is that you can select the hertz, and then this compressor will only it will act more like a multi-band compressor with 2 bands. So you have basically the low band now below 155 hertz, which is not affected, and the higher band above 155 hertz, which will then be affected by the compressor. But that's something I guess most of you already knew, and it's something which also doesn't bring you kind of like the enlightenment, which for me was how actually a compressor changed the sound, because that's what you're actually using for. I mean, there's no reason, or maybe if you don't want to clip in the master or something, to reduce the dynamic range without a purpose. And the purpose is actually you want to change the sound somehow. So let's talk a little bit about all those knobs. And the first thing I have to tell you is not a single knob works on its own. So it's always the combination of all of those knobs you have. So let's go first with the threshold. That's the first thing I usually set up. And to listen for the compression, I usually set this so that I'm somewhere like 3 dB, gain reduction, maximum maybe like 5. I will reduce this then later to the level I want to have, but I don't want to have too less because then I don't hear recompression. And if I overdo it, everything will be so screwed that you don't listen for anything. So listen, if I put this here, then you don't hear basically the sound as it sounds anymore. As you hear, it's kind of like pointless to put it here, but if you have it here, it's also pointless because the compressor is not doing anything. So we want to have it like 3 to 5 dBs maybe to get a good point of listening. Let's keep it here for now. As said, in the channels I don't use the range much. You can, obviously, if you have maybe a signal which is triggering the compressor too much, then you can basically limit it by that. The makeup we will come later to, because it's really important when you evaluate what you have done with the compressor, because louder is always better, but if we tweak it now, then we have to tweak it like every few seconds. So I would go later, a little bit later about this. So let's talk about the attack here. So if you look at the sound here, and if you open a synthesizer in your DAW, then you will see you have the ADSR, the envelope. For example, like in Serum, it's envelope 1. And the ADSR means basically your sound, until it reaches the highest point, has some attack, the sound itself. So I'm talking not about the compressor now. So it takes some time for the sound to reach its highest point. Then you have a decay to sustain level. That's how long it takes until it gets that kind of like flat curve here. And then you have the release in the sound, how long it takes when you release the keyboard or something to get back to 0. And this kind of like transient in the beginning is the reason why you hear a sound sticking out of the mix. Basically, because if you compare, for example, a lead sound, which like this, for example, you have that transient here very early with a pad sound. So what you can do, basically, open a pad in your synthesizer, open a lead in your synthesizer, bounce this to audio like this, press one note and bounce this to audio like this, and you will see that this attack is way different. And so if you want to have your sound in front in the mix, then this transient is an important element. And this attack of the compressor works basically in a similar way. It says how fast should I attack the signal when it hits the threshold here. And if the attack is very, very fast, then you will kill this transient earlier or more of this transient. And that way the sound sounds a little bit more washed out and goes into the back. So listen for it. And especially in the mix. You feel it? More present here, less present here. So that's the first thing we will consider. It's with the attack, basically you can control how early you attack the dynamics. So if you want to attack something like this, which happens with the MIDI node, then you need to attack obviously early, but at the same time keep in mind that it will color the sound in a way that it gets more like washed out, more in the back. Then let's talk about the ratio really quick here. A high ratio, as we have seen here, is reducing the signal a lot, while a slow ratio is not affecting the signal as much. So listen for the difference. Let's set this maybe to here first. So we will do this. So if we have it more like 10 or more higher, like here at infinity, it acts more like a limiter. So it will clip off all the transients, and that way everything becomes more sustained. And if you have it slighter, then it's not affecting it so much. This is something more if you want to be more like gentle to the sound and just push it a little bit in the direction. Then let's talk about the release. I put it in auto here now, but I never do that on any compressor. I'm a control freak and I want to have full control. And if one setting doesn't fit for me, then I will automate it. So auto is usually something I don't use on any VST. It's basically how fast our compression is released, so how fast it goes back to the original. And if this is very short, then you get more like a pumping sound, but you can also get like a distorted sound. This is especially important if you compress kicks, because you can quickly get that kind of like not pleasant distorted sound in it, and that's something to watch out. So listen for it if we go from slow value to a fast value. I will quickly increase the volume for you guys. So I put this threshold that this compressor won't affect anything, and you want to just raise the volume here. You can listen it a bit better. So just to say a little bit about my values, most of the leads I compress like 0.1 to 0.3 in that range. So here on the Ableton I go usually, sometimes I go even down like this, but usually I'm here maybe or here. So that's kind of like the values I go for. And with the release, I'm usually quite fast because I want to have like rapid and shooting usually. And I have the feeling if the release is too slow, you also kind of like get that a little bit messy, not washed out sound, but it doesn't sound so clear and distinctive anymore. Listen for it again. So that's kind of the effect of the release on the coloring. And now we will take a look at dry wet. You can use that parallel compression thing that you have one part of the signal going out wet and one dry. If you set it like that, then I think you can get way more aggressive on all those knobs. So for example, you can then maybe go for a higher ratio. You can make it more pumping and everything, because you're still keeping some of the original signal. And that way, at least as I see, you can go more aggressive on the compression itself here. But what I usually do is, and that's the second way I want to explain this, once I found some settings I like on the sound here, then I usually try if it improves if I go a little bit back here. So sometimes I think it's nice if you don't go like 100%, but maybe like 75%, so that you have a little bit of that dry signal coming through. So don't think of parallel compression that this dry wet mixer only has the positions 0, 50 and 100. Let's look at the next point here. So we will go for 100 here. Let's go like this. Here, this is a really nice thing, because especially if you have things, for example, like if you want to color your bass and you don't want to change too much in the low end of the sound, listen, if I apply this, then only the highs will be affected. And I think you will listen it a bit better if we go more extreme in the settings. So I will go now to 10 here, and I even will increase this a little bit that you can hear it better. Can you hear the change of that? The low sound is more balanced here, while if I turn this up here, then the high sound becomes way more present now. Yeah, that's actually something really cool for coloring the sound, so that you can change this here. And now I want to talk about A-Bing and the makeup, because this is something really important. If you tweak those knobs for a while, usually everything sounds better after a while, and you become deaf to the sound. And what I would recommend you is always A-B with stuff. And that's really nice that this A-B is in here. And if you A-B, you need to compare at the same levels. So that's what we use the makeup also for. So at the moment we have our B is basically not affecting because threshold is here. So it's the same as on off, but we could have set up a second thing here. Or let's do it maybe. We'll do this here 50%. And then we will take our B version. Now I went for this, what I explained, I went like 100% here, and I went less aggressive here. Yeah, maybe like this. And we will go super aggressive here, but with a less dry wet signal, and also we have more compression here. And now we'll check our meter here. So we're in channel 55. And we should turn that off, otherwise we're clipping. Okay. So let's put the compressor off. So most of the time we get minus 10.7, or especially in the beginning. I would orientate on that. And now we will turn it on and increase the makeup until we are at the same. Okay. The same goes for RB here. And now we can do a more fair comparison. So let's listen between A and B. So for example, I think mainly because of the dry wet, because we're letting signals through, sounds a little bit more clear. And then when you adjust stuff, you then need to readjust the makeup gain. So I hope this enlightened you a bit about compression in general. And I want to talk a bit more about here. You have some things where you can set like oversampling. So usually if you have the CPU, go for higher qualities, because it will sound better, obviously. And the higher qualities means more CPU. So oversampling basically is it takes the sample, then samples it up, processes it, and samples it down. And by this kind of like process, it has, and by this process, you basically get less artifacts and stuff in your sound. So it's usually better to go for the higher qualities in the VSTs. If you have a problem with CPU, then I can recommend to freeze your channels or bounce it to audio and keep the original MIDI somewhere in your project. But it's usually not good if you go to a too low rate here. One last tip, what you can do is to find more about compression is that you take another track here as an exercise. You will solo this, or you put here to this track if you don't want to solo and go on resampling. And then you will record this and you will see how the compression changed the waveform. Maybe post effects, because otherwise you will also have the gain reduction of this in here. And as you can see, let me copy this, because this is so let's look in here, and I copied the upper one. So as you can see, it made everything more even. So if I paste the upper one here, you can see this goes down. We have this peak here. And now the compressor flattened everything a bit out. And that's also, and that flattening out and kind of like increasing the volume of the lower sections gives your sound more stability and more pressure, but at the cost of losing those transients and having thus a less defined sound.